This project has been a work of the Planning and Development Committee, and there you see their names listed. And also their chapters are listed behind them to drive home the point that we're all members of the organization. We're all teachers. We got a couple people in our organization that are employees, too. They're both musicians. One's a past music educator, but the rest of us are volunteers and all members of chapters. Wonderful people that I got to learn from and work with, a couple in parentheses, which mean they rolled off our committee. But hopefully there's a person on there near you because the committee is representative of the United States. Well, when I first figured out that I would be leading this strategic planning, I had to think, well, what in the world is a strategic plan? Strategic plan, simple, clear roadmap, just gives us a prioritized list of our best ideas, specific goals, and steps to get there. Accessible language makes our goals clear to everybody that's a stakeholder. Strategic plan is the art of saying no more than the art of saying yes. As a business, you can do a million things. And we know that because OAKE has done a million things over the last 50 years. Strategic planning is about finding a short list of the highest impact projects. So it's a filter to best, most wisely use our limited resources that we have. Why should we bother doing it? Well, so that we have clarity and agreement on the mission of our organization and so that we can effectively manage change, which there's been a little bit of in the last 3 years, hasn't there? And it aligns all of the board and staff all on the same page. Gets us all moving in the right direction, in the same direction. And the last one was created in 2014, and it was created in a format which I think we needed at the time that was very specific, and it was a list of strategic goals as well as projects to achieve those goals and target dates. And it was probably 60 to 80 pages. And our charge was different. There it is. Take care to make the plan flexible, fluid, and not necessarily constrained by specific dates. So we came upon the idea of writing a strategic framework. What is a strategic framework, you may ask? Well, overarching guidelines, not specific goals. Still is a list of priorities. It allows us to quickly and efficiently respond to change. Big picture ideas and allows us a framework for prioritization and decision making for the board and for our staff. As we face decisions, we can look at the strategic framework. Does it fit within our priorities there? So the highlights of our process when we started this in March of 2022 was, okay, let's revisit what the purpose of our organization is and who is it that we're actually trying to serve. Let's come up with some action keywords that we want to make sure we're doing. Let's do a SWOT analysis. Let's look at our strengths. Let's look at our weaknesses. Let's look at opportunities that we have in front of us. In other words, one of the biggest ones, for example, is training programs churning out new people. We don't have to pay for that. They're training the people for us. There's an opportunity for us, for example. And we also looked at our threats. Then we looked at some strategic priorities and figured out, okay, if to make those happen, what do we have to do? What are the actions that we're going to have to take in a general sense? And if we do those actions, what specific outcome are we expecting? As we looked at the book, we started with our membership. And in other words, we went to the advisory council, which is made up of all the chapter presidents and treasurers and division presidents and treasurers and regional reps, members of the organization with your voice. And we said at our luncheon in Pittsburgh in 2022, what is the purpose of OAKE? What are we supposed to do? Please talk at your tables and share out. And they created some slides and they shared and they shared and they shared, and it was wonderful, wonderful conversation. And then I took all those slides of ideas that they had of what OAKE should be doing. And on the plane on the way home, I took all the different statements and kind of lumped them together and came up really with some themes that were recurrent in this discussion. One of them is a purpose of OAKE is to provide education to our members in Kodai-inspired teaching. And another purpose, advocate for the philosophy not necessarily in a legislative sense, but more in a teaching the music education community about what it is that we do. We really should provide inspiration to people, provide them with new ways to use the philosophy and new ways to incorporate it in their classroom and in ways that fit better in 2023. And then the biggest thing that people kept coming back to was OAKE is my people. OAKE is my community. I teach in central Nebraska and I'm an elementary music teacher here. And I love teaching here and living here and raising a family here, but I don't have any other Kodai people in the school district or really even in the area of the state. So I rely on OAKE so that when I'm talking with people at a chapter workshop in Lincoln or Omaha, or when I am at a national conference or a division event, they get me and they like see education the way that I do. So we flesh those out a little bit, provide ongoing teacher ed, advocate for the Kodai philosophy, principles, and Kodai inspired teaching, inspire personal and professional growth through a spirit of inquiry, provide a space for all within a collaborative, inclusive community. That is how we see it, and the advisory council see it as the purposes of OAKE. And everything we decide goes through that filter. Does this decision that we're making, whether it be on the division level, the national level, or hopefully the chapter level, does it provide education, advocacy, inspiration, or community? We only have so many resources. We also had to decide who it is our audience, because as you look, if your eyes can see that tiny font, we could provide services to all of these things. And at some point over the last 50 years, we have provided services or membership benefits in some capacity to all of these different groups. Well, we just don't have the capacity to that. So let's really focus in on, we again ask the advisory council, who's the primary audience? And after lots of discussion, the primary audience to whom we will direct our national resources and services, music educators with an interest in Kodai teaching. Not necessarily levels, but maybe they just think it's cool and they haven't learned anything yet. OAKE chapters, and OAKE endorsed Kodai training programs. The primary audiences to whom we will encourage our chapters to direct their resources, music educators and undergrads. We don't dictate or mandate what our chapters do, right? But we could advise them, hey, here's a couple audiences that you might put your resources into. So then we thought, okay, considering our purpose, considering our audience, considering the current state of our organization, and then considering 2023 in the United States of America and the world, let's figure out what do we really need to focus on to remain a viable organization for the next 50 years. And we came up with two things. And it was so easy to just do that. I went from this slide to that slide, done. If only it had been that easy in real life. Months of discussion. And finally, it just came to us. Somebody brilliant on our committee said, you know what? What if we just went community and sustainability? And the room fell silent. At least in my head it did. And we had found our strategic priorities. Develop and strengthen connection among our members, and ensure a thriving organization at the chapter, division, and national level. As we flesh those out, I talked about actions. Well, what are we going to do to make sure that we develop and strengthen connections among our members? Culture of belonging, where everybody feels welcomed and valued. Encourage people to connect with other members around things that they are interested in and that are meaningful to them. Recognize and celebrate the things that our members are doing and the ideas that they have. And coordinate career-long relationships. In other words, there's a place for everybody on the OAKE path, right? In other words, well, I don't have my levels yet, so I don't want to be an OAKE. Well, I only took level 2, so I don't really, it's not for me. Well, I already did my levels, so I'm done with OAKE. Well, I've been teaching for 32 years, so I don't really need, no, everybody. There's a place for everyone within this organization. Availability of resources, materials, trainings, and coachings to help chapters thrive. Our big push is that we are helping chapters. That's one of our primary audiences, chapters, and support robust training programs. And we want to explore digital content. It's 2023. We have to be able to provide PD digitally. Let's look at what that might look like. And then as far as sustainability, well, urgent fiscal priorities, we have to address those. through booming participation. Love that word, booming. Advocate for the Kodai philosophy so that people in the whole music education world understand us better. Develop indicators of chapter health so that chapters can see, are we healthy? Are we not healthy? And if we're not, how can we get better? OAKE can provide some resources to help with those basic needs. One central and accessible site for the national conference for the next 5 years, and forge relationships with donors. We don't want to keep coming back to our membership all the time. Can you give more? Can you give more? Can you give more? So we want to look at forging relationships with other donors outside of our membership that will enhance our work. Check that out. One piece of paper instead of 60 to 80 pages. So that's a front and back. That encompasses the entire strategic direction of our organization. We're proud of that because we feel like it's usable. And it's a framework for making decisions, not necessarily a to-do list. All those actions are real pretty and everything, but what happens if you do them? In other words, if you foster that culture, what happens? Well, we can make membership an invaluable experience and a worthwhile investment. We can have our members prioritizing the participation in our events. People that see the Kodai approach applied in a variety of contexts and inspired to use it for their own ideas. In other words, I go to a national conference and I see these young whippersnappers and they're saying, okay, here's what I do with the Kodai philosophy. And I watch it and I'm like, brilliant. It's there. The Kodai framework is there, and they're flipping it on its side and they're changing it and they're using it in unique ways to address needs in 2023. It's fantastic. Members share how OAKE is enhancing their life, and we retain membership regardless of where they are on the path. Chapter leaders have a lot of different resources that they can use to strengthen their chapters, and we want members to be actively involved. And of course, if we support the training programs, well, continued development following training through OAKE, and people will seek OAKE membership to support their ongoing learning. Oh, my level 3 is over. Now what do I do? Oh, you join OAKE and you take infinite levels through chapter and division and national PD. Or digital content. People are able to see the richness of the approach in action. Fiscal priorities through booming participation in our events. Plan to see a balanced budget and actuals for fiscal year 2026. Shared messaging, greater understanding, so that we can support chapters and training programs, attracting more people to come. And if chapters, when they provide local PD and encourages people to go to their division events and to their national events, people come back year after year. And through this, by developing these indicators of chapter health, eventually then we get to a point where we have a pool of volunteers and chapter leaders that's active and that's growing. That's the outcome that we plan to see. And people keep coming back to that same site. They attend and they repeat. We'll talk more about that site in a little bit and about the advantages of doing it that way. Donations and legacy giving ensure decades of growth for us all. Okay, that's nice to have that nice action, and then you think that this is the outcome's going to happen. Well, how are you going to get from there to there? How are you going to bridge what are you going to actually do? Well, that's where the action planning comes in, a strategic action plan. Who's going to commit? Who's going to do these strategic action plans? Where I'm going to have our committees. We're going to request our committee structure within the national board to complete an action plan. And if you've done a SMART goal for school, it's a lot like that. It's just this little easy form that says, hey, what's your committee going to do? How long is it going to take you? What resources do you need? Because remember, those are rather limited. And how are you going to know whether it worked? So they're going to choose one of those actions with guidance from the Planning and Development and Executive Committee. And they're going to brainstorm as a committee, what can we do to support this action so that this outcome happens? And, that committee might brainstorm 17, 18 ideas, or 5 ideas, or 3 ideas. Okay, but narrow those down to one. What one project or action could your committee do to make sure that you're addressing one of these actions in the strategic framework? And like I said, those of you that have been a member of OAKE for a few years, you've seen lots of ideas come and go. We're music teachers. That's what we do. We think of things. We're creative, and we think of ways that we can. And so we end up with oftentimes too many projects that just go on. And we're all volunteers, except for those two people. We all got day jobs. And so we want to make sure that we are narrowing our focus, and we narrow the focus of those OAKE committees. And we're modeling this then for our chapters. We're not going to force our chapter leaders to do anything, but we're going to encourage, and we're going to model this for them if they want to take this on. And you're thinking, well, yeah, that's great, but what if I'm not on a committee and I want to help? Well, you can help. Isn't that a beautiful thing? We came up with 3 WIGs, in other words, wildly important goals for this next year that address things in our strategic framework that we really feel like if these 3 goals, if we meet these 3 things that you can help with, we'll have a sizable, immediate, positive impact on OAKE. Conference. Get the word out. Tell people. Post on Facebook. Share. Be the broken record. And get people in your local sphere to join OAKE. I'm going to work on my co-teachers here that aren't Kodai trained yet. And get them to join OAKE. Get them to submit national choir auditions, which will happen in the fall. And then register for the conference. Register early and commit to participating in that. That's where the booming comes. We're going to be there St. Patrick's Day. Number 2, maintain your membership, please. Consider becoming a lifetime member. Serve in a leadership position. Well, I already did that. I'm to the point in my career. Well, you know what? We'll find a place for you. Maybe you're mentoring new teachers. Maybe you're, oh, I'm too new. I've only taught for a year. We'll find a place for you. There is a lot of work to go around. We need you to serve in a leadership position. If we could do those 3 things, that would have a huge impact on our organization. Strategic framework timeline. There we go. We worked on it for a year and a month, kind of continued on after that. Presented it to the board in September of this year, presented it to the advisory council, the wonderful leaders, chapter leaders in Jacksonville, got their feedback on it, and now we're presenting it to you. We had a town hall in May, and this evening tonight, again, you're here because you care about OAKE, and that's a beautiful thing. So thank you for listening to all this. We want to start our action planning this summer. Now, I don't have the answers for this on the right side of that little square. How could the goals of the strategic plan be implemented on the chapter level at the grassroots level? What actions, outcomes most resonate with leaders and members at the chapter level? What strategic projects could be implemented at the chapter level and then replicated elsewhere in the country? In other words, hey, we did this, and this is what was good, and this is what was bad, and this is the great effect that it had on our chapter. Really? Well, we're going to try it now that you did in our chapter. That's the goal. A couple of questions that you might already have, and we've thought of that. And so Brian, the wonderful elementary/middle school music educator that he is in the Northwest United States, and also happens to be our treasurer, is going to tell you about the ways that OAKE, the strategic plan rather, shape and drive decision making about finances, investment of time, etc.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. One of the things that I've heard said sometimes is that one of the best reflections of your values is how you spend your time and how you spend your money. So now that we have this framework established of what our priorities are as an organization, this then becomes the lens through which we're evaluating where do we invest our limited human resources and the time that we have, as well as where do we invest our financial resources in a way that is going to be most beneficial in achieving these particular goals. So as we move forward, look forward to the fall, and we set our budget for the coming year after this one of the things that we will be looking at is in what ways does spending money on this particular project, this program, support a specific goal. And if we find ourselves in a situation where we may need to prioritize one thing over another, then this is the framework through which we will end up doing that.
Thank you, Brian. Tanya, also a member of our Planning and Development Committee. A lot of you know Tanya, teaches in Colorado. How is the topic of repertoire choices addressed in the strategic plan? Thank you, Tanya.
Well, in regard to repertoire choices, OAKE, rather than give specific repertoire lists, The strategic plan promotes professional and personal inquiry and curiosity through teacher education and community. OAKE members individually and collectively are reflecting on our own practices through ongoing conversations and involvement. This ties in with our strategic framework, where we want to be providing that ongoing teacher education and inspiring that personal and professional growth and that spirit of inquiry, curiosity, and that keeps us alive in our own practice and as a community.
Then, would you, Mr. Pearson, president of OAKE and a high school choral director in Oklahoma, talk about this slide? If you
So OAKE right now is in a position where we have to make choices. You know, Tom mentioned the fact that over the last 50 years, we've done so many different things and we have spread ourselves so thin. And so this strategic plan is specifically designed for us to be able to say no to some things and to be able to say not yet to some things. And that is entirely appropriate for an organization like ours, especially, you know, because we are run by volunteers and two paid staff, and you know, we have to make choices. One of the most high profile choices that we've made recently has been to reduce the number of national conference choirs from 5 down to 2 beginning in 2025. And, you know, that decision to engage in the decision to move in that direction, there was a lot of conversation about, you know, what are we capable of doing? And we had to come to the conclusion that, you know, while this is a great success of ours, how can we best spend our resources? And so by reducing that, we're able to really narrow in and meet the needs of our members, the people who are engaging in that particular segment of our activities. And it's going to allow us to really just as we are moving forward with this strategic plan, you know, our focus is going to be on supporting members, supporting chapters, you know, helping things grow at the ground level. And so, you know, we're going to be prioritizing a lot of things that are related to that particular element.
Lauren, our wonderful employee, executive director, and a music educator, can you tell us why the emphasis on a repeated conference location? Why does it matter?
Well, we repeatedly hear in our conference surveys and elsewhere that the reason that people like to attend the national event is, like we said, the community, because it's where you see your people, and the professional development is something that at the in-person level really creates a change in people's teaching career and gives people ideas and people to discuss those ideas with. And it's also where a lot of our national just business occurs at the General Assembly. We give recognition awards and things like that. So it was clear that we're going to continue with the conference. So how do we make the conference the biggest bang for the buck that we can create? And rather than have an employee travel around the country every year trying to find the best locations for us and then trying to find the best deal and the best offer from these various hotels, we wanted to dig into a location where we knew people would love to come back, and we really prioritized accessible flights and tried to get the best hotel rate we could for our attendees and for our choir families. The additional hope is that by being in the same location for several years, we can develop relationships there and hopefully do some more fundraising, make some partnerships with organizations that will resonate with our mission and continue to grow what we do.
And our site for 2024, we just talked about with Chicago, 25 and beyond, we're still signing, crossing T's and dotting I's, right? Not quite ready to announce that, but we're closer. So stay tuned. Why change? Kevin just alluded to this, from 5 choirs to 2 choirs beginning not in 2024, but in 2025. Well, let's look, everybody, here at the current plan. And currently we're running 4 choirs, which would be the children's choir, grades 4 and 5, and then a treble choir in kind of a middle school, SSAA, 6th through 8th grade. And then we have a high school, essentially a women's choir, treble voices, 9 through 12, and then a SATB choir, 9 through 12. The 5th choir we tried for several years to get a middle school SATB or SAB choir, and just never had the audition numbers to warrant making that choir go. And the plan then, beginning not at this next conference, 4 choirs, but after that, 2. Why? Not just financially. People have said, "Oh, well, if we could find a donor to underwrite those choirs, can we just keep having them?" Well, this is not just financial; it's also strategic. Remember, education, advocacy, inspiration, community, and it's evolving, it's changing who we are and what we do. And 8% in Jacksonville, 8% of our members submitted auditions. And it's a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful program, and it's passionate to those 8% people. But that means 92% of the membership it's obviously not a priority to them, or they're unable for whatever reason to submit auditions. Keep in mind we have 2 employees, and we ask them to do a lot. Hey, will you run the conference? Oh, and then run these 4 honor choirs for us. Well, you get some volunteers too. They can kind of help, sort of. And then we want you to write some grants and make sure we retain members. And will you also help the chapters? And will you do this? Oh, yeah. But will you also do the Code Envoy now, please? And then do this and do this and do this. And these are 2 brilliant people. And I think, oh my gosh, what if one of them left and we had to replace them? I mean, they do so much already. A significant portion of our payroll, about 40% of it, goes towards the honor choir program, between time and finances. It's a lot of money from our limited resources to pour into a program that 8% of our members have sent in auditions. A lot of projects. Let's right size the number of projects we have. Let's narrow that scope for a while, at least for 5 years or so, and to make this the whole thing sustainable. And we also want to retain our volunteers. Our volunteers are fantastic. Our committee members are so committed, and we just don't want to see them burnt out. We want to use them in the most efficient way. And there it is again, that evolving identity. You notice that we decided, when you first say, oh, we're going to help teachers, chapters, and we're going to support training programs. Oh, great. What's not on that list? Children. We had to make a strategic decision. Are we a child providing services to children? Or is that the kind of organization that we have? Or are we providing teachers so that they can support the children? That's the direction that we feel like our organization is going, in a smart way. We just feel like the most efficient way to help children in the thousands is to work through their teachers. So not till 2025. Still got 2 high school choirs in 2024. What other questions do you have?
I was just going to comment. I would just like to compliment you all on just the thought that has gone into this, and it really resonates with me that you're really trying to funnel it, that you're just like, we can do this, we can't do this. I really do appreciate that. Maybe one question to throw out, maybe it's already been done, but I think Gimel, I believe, does hold their conference every other year, but they have, it sounds like they've made the decision. They're always in Chicago or outside Chicago. So I don't know if it would be worth, maybe you already have reached out to them and found out what is the advantage of that. Is that something they have made a strategic decision to do? So that was just something I was going to throw out, but I wanted to just mainly compliment, because it sounds like some real tough calls have been made, and I really do appreciate just the thought that's gone into it.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's a brilliant group of people. This whole organization is, like I said, you're my people, all of you. So, but seriously, everybody, continue to think about this and put your thoughts into words and send them to us. I'll give you a survey link here in a little bit. There's some of you on this call that remember this. I found this in a document. I was looking at old stuff and I'm like, what? that it was like a done decision back in 1998 that the board was like, you know what, we're going to change our name. And the OAKE change, we're going to change to Kodai Music Educators of America effective July 1st. Oh, and then in small print, pending approval of the general membership. Well, we all know how that turned out because we're not the Kodai Music Educators of America, and I understand the reasoning. But this tells me that even though I don't recall the specifics, people were committed to the label, right? The OAKE, even though we don't have music in our name and it's confusing and people say, you did code what over the summer? Will you teach how? That we were committed to OAKE because of all that OAKE signifies. In my first house, my wife and I, is our first house at about the same time in 1997. The next picture on the right is the same house, but circled is my tree, my oak tree. We had a big storm and all these trees died. And then they said, hey, we're giving away free trees. I'm like, I'll take a free tree. And I had this oak tree. And I'm like, well, where am I going to put this in my little tiny yard in this subdivision? I'll just put it over there in the corner of the yard. It's empty. It's an oak tree, for God's sakes. It needs to be in the park, but I didn't know. And I've learned so much since then about oak trees. They don't even start to do the whole acorn thing until 20 to 40 years. I planted this one like 25 years ago. I don't live there anymore, but thanks to Google Earth, tells me that's what it looks like now. But they can last 600 years, even 2,000 years. And as long as everything's going well, as long as they're healthy and they still have that little ring, they get a new ring every year, xylem. There's your new word for tonight. As long as free of disease, free of pests, free of environment, it's all going to be good. Well, this little tree in Bellevue, Nebraska, where I planted it in my front yard, it might not survive because I did not use any strategic planting when I planted that tree. I just stuck it where it could have some space. And the point is that our oak tree will continue to grow for another 50, 60, 200, 2,000 years because we are thinking strategically. We are thinking in terms of it's 2023, and we really have to be very intentional about what we do and how we do it. So I encourage you, thank you for listening to my little tree story and my trip down memory lane. I encourage you to reach out. I'm going to send you a link to this survey. It's not very long. And it just helps us get some feedback from you about what you think and if we're on the right track. And because it doesn't matter if the 15 of us on the planning and development committee all think this is the greatest thing. Our membership are the ones that have to buy into this with us because it's all of us working together for OAKE. So I'll stay on the call if anybody wants to chat, but otherwise, thank you so much for giving of your time on a Thursday night in June, of all things, to come here about strategic planning. And I look forward to meeting you all in person, seeing you all in person in Chicago in March. Thank you all.
Tom.
Thank you all. Good to see you, Joe. Missed
Good
you.
to see you too. All of you. Makes me smile.
Good. Likewise.